The Rough Drafts podcast is sponsored by Unicorn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Bet on your favorite games like CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends, and earn Unicoins through successful bets, or use Unicorn's exclusive Connect program, where you can earn Unicoins just by playing some of your favorite games. Use your earnings to enter Unicorn's raffles for exciting prizes like Logitech peripherals or CSGO skins. So join Chase and Walter and prove who really is the esports gambling expert. Unicorn.com. Log on today.
Hello, Internet. This is Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar. Welcome to Day 7 of our North American LCS team-by-team preview series. We are so excited to talk to you about today's team. This is a team that I have been itching to talk about basically since Dardoch signed. Not even going to pretend to hide it this time around. It's in the title, everybody. I can't wait to talk about this Immortals roster. They made so many changes despite doing so well in the regular season in hopes of maybe turning this into some playoff success. And I am joined, as always, to break this team down with by my good friend, Walter Ceades, Fedczuk. Walter, how you doing, man?
I mean, I would be ecstatic if Dardoch joined my team too. Like, I totally get it. I would have loved Dardoch to have joined TSM in the offseason, but, you know, I guess I'll just settle on good old Svenskeren, so...
Yeah, what a shame.
Oh, darn.
My heart's breaking for you, man.
It should break.
Look,
damn TSM fans, we never get what we want. Darn it.
Man, I could hear people typing already. We're going to talk about Immortals today. They went 16-2 in the regular season last split. Their only 2 losses were to TSM. They got 3rd place in the playoffs. They lost 2-3 at Cloud9, but finally won a playoff series by beating CLG 3-2. Then got 2nd place in the North American Regionals. Again, it was a loss to Cloud9 that did them in. But they got to the semifinals at IEM Gyeonggi. That's nice. They had a whole bunch of all-pro players on their team, but none of those players are on the roster anymore. So of the all-pros that matter, Pobelter is the one that we can talk about. That was 2nd team all-pro. Obviously, Dardoch was a 1st team all-pro for Team Liquid. Flame was in... 3rd team All-Pro for Team Liquid, thank you. Flame was in Korea playing for Longzhu. That is the reason why Immortals get to become my new favorite team, because as listeners of the podcast know, I am a huge CJantis fan. CJantis Blaze was my first favorite team. I am very sad about what happened to them, but now I can watch Flame and be in denial for an entire split. So this will be wonderful for me. Also, Cody Sun is now their AD carry. He comes from Dream Team and the North American Challenger scene. Ollie is a Korean who played for Hong Kong Esports as a support. They have Robert Yip now as the head coach for Dylan Falco, the outgoing Dylan Falco, and Hermes is now the analyst instead of Jez's. Walter, what do you make about this offseason?
When I first saw this roster, I was ecstatic. I was, like, super excited. Dardoch and Flame, Bash Brothers, like, I was getting Mighty Ducks 1, like, chills all up in my spine. Pobelter emerged last summer as, you know, definitively a top 3 mid laner, and at times number 2 versus Jensen. They would kind of battle it back and forth in that position. Cody Sun, like Masquerade, I watch a lot of Challenger Series. He looked really, really good in the Challenger Series. I really wanted TSM to go get. Another player I wanted TSM to go get, oh darn, just because of his Biofrost connection. Really strong AD carry, thought he would be exceptional. Then they announced their support 2 days before IEM Gyeonggi. And there were rumors all about. We had the jersey snafu where they tweeted out pictures of Peekaboo and Gorilla on the back of Immortals jerseys that they had to apologize for. You know, a bunch of different names, all, you know, Kosing, a bunch of names just all thrown in the mix of possibly ending up here. And then they land on Ole. I don't watch much LMS. We've established this on the podcast before. I won't insult them this time.
Walter.
Yeah,
I don't say.
I don't know much about him. I was like, okay, well, luckily there's a tournament on in like 3 days that I get to watch. And granted, I gotta take it with a grain of salt. They had like 1 day of practice together. They were all, different country. Nobody cares about IEMs. And then I watched it. And Pobelter was great. The Bash Brothers were excellent, dude. And then the bot lane. Holy cow. The bot lane looks awful. It looks very, very bad. They do not look like they belong together in the LCS.
It was a weird tournament. I think that's safe to say. I have concerns as well for the same reason. I am less concerned than you are, mostly because I agreed a long time ago. IEM doesn't matter. It has never mattered. I've never seen an IEM result then foretell how the rest of the year was going to go. It's just not usually how that works out.
Fair. It's totally
and
fair.
We have to remember, like you said, very little practice and a rookie AD carry and a support in a new region. Maybe we hold our horses down off of from one tournament. Maybe we wait and see a little bit more. I think that there's been I don't mean that directly towards you. I think that that's been a general impression that people are starting to have.
But the problem is, the hype was here. The hype was they're the second best team in North America behind TSM. And then as much as it doesn't matter, that's still games that we saw the roster play. And now everyone's hype is like, oh.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I think you're seeing that as far as every analyst that I'm hearing from, people have kind of changed their opinion on it. But before we get into exactly where our opinions have now ended up, what excites you about this team? Because even with the trepidations that you now have to carry with you, there have to be some things that are still exciting even after IEM Gyeonggi.
Oh, Bash Brothers. That I'm officially dubbing the Flame Dardoch duo pairing the Bash Brothers. Straight up. Stealing it. Don't care. Mighty Ducks.
All in favor.
All in favor. Aye. Done. Unanimous. They're the Bash Brothers because that is what this team is really going to be relying on, is this pairing. And to be frank, that's what Dardoch and Lorelu kind of did together back in Team Liquid. They really like to pair up. They like to abuse the enemy top laner, get Lorelu a little bit of a lead, and Flame is just in another echelon from Lorelu. He is in another plane. If Lorelu is a human, Flame is a deity. There you go, Thorin. Like, comment, subscribe down here. You're the Ceades fan. You know all this. But, watching them play, again, IEM Gyeonggi. IEMs don't matter. It was still games that we got to see them play. And on very little practice time, they were really in sync. They really were pairing up. Flame looked great on tanks. He's playing Maokai and stuff. They really were working together, roaming together, coming down into the bot lane with Pobelter and Dardoch moving around together. That three-man core looked exceptional. And it's really exciting because Pobelter had this sort of ascension in the summer. Again, the Immortals lineup with Huni and Reignover was about Huni and Reignover. It wasn't about Pobelter. Pobelter was that consistent mid laner. He's always going to do his job. He'll play his few champions. He'll supplement everything else. You'll be fine. And then he took another level. He hit another notch. He turned it up to 11.
Yes.
As Wild Turtle declined. And it just showed this guy that as the only North American mid laner, he was fantastic. He excelled. He was up there matching and laning against Jensen and Bjergsen and matching up with them and really making those teams have to rely on other ways to win their games. And pairing him with this exceptional duo in Dardoch, who I think is, he's one of the best junglers in North America. He might be the best talent in North America now. The double lift is off streaming. And Flame has not been great since the old school carry days, where teleport was not a spell you took in the top lane unless you were cheesing a CLG or Dignitas with some crazy support 3 teleport composition. This was when real top laners took Ignite. Real top laners played Akali. Real top laners killed the enemy top laner with reckless abandon. And I think there is a chance that Flame has had to live up to that reputation too much, and on every team he's been on LGD, on Longzhu, it's, we expect the Flame of old, when that's just not the style. And I think it's finally now hit the moment where no one expects Flame of old. No one expects Flame to be solo carrying on Kennen or the Akali or anything like that. Now it's like, all right, Flame is an extremely mechanical player. He does have the ability to carry when it is the appropriate meta, but he can also fill this tanky bruiser top laner with excellent teleports, and he likes to roam, and he has this veteran presence that he can bring to the team. I'm excited. I think both Dardoch and Flame have chips on their shoulders from previous experiences. Team Liquid for Dardoch, Longzhu for Flame, and I think together they are going to be a fearsome duo.
Yeah, I think the core is really what you look at and have to get excited about. And as you said, that 3-person core has the potential to be quite scary. As much as I would love to see the Flame of Old, as much as Thornton would love to see the Flame of Old, I think you absolutely hit it on the head that he's at a different point of his career. But I think Flame knows it. I think Flame tends to play within what's been working for him recently. He's been very consistent. I feel like he was misused in Longzhu quite often, yes. But when he was put in a position to succeed, I think he succeeded. And there's reason to believe that he and Dardoch and Pobelter, these 2 North American homegrown talents that are just dominating at their positions against most of their competition, that's such a great core. That's everything that you want when you're establishing why your team is going to be this huge threat moving forward. Right. But every yin comes a yang. Every excitement comes nervousness. And there are 2 guys that you did not talk about in that exciting section, so I think I know where they're ending up, Walter.
Listen, I know I was excited about Massacre, now known as Cody's son. He was a really good rookie talent, and I think a lot of teams were looking at him to be a young, up and coming AD carry that they could potentially fill a role with. I didn't expect him to come out and be the second coming of Doublelift and Stylion kids. I don't think anyone expected that. He looked outmatched at IEM Gyeonggi. You can't write that away. He looked outmatched. The other AD carries really caused him problems, especially when you look at the games against Samsung. Really just caused him Ruler just caused him a ton of problems. He did not look like he knew how to control lane. And it doesn't help that his support didn't look like he knew how to control lane. He was really falling heavily onto tankier supports and didn't look well on the range mage kind of supports that are currently in meta. Historically, Ole has been a tank player. He's been an Alistar. He's been a Braum player. His Thresh has been pretty solid in the past. But when you pair these together, it doesn't work. They just didn't work together. They didn't control lane together. And again, minimal practice time. They'll get used to each other. Not every bot lane in North America is core JJ Ruler. I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was the first point I was going to make in response, which is that, yeah, they looked a little foolish against a team that just made it to the World Championship off the back of a rookie AD carry having a massive split after struggling initially and then getting better with more time and experience. This is literally, it's ironic that the player that is now making people dismiss Cody's son is the same player that should be pointed as an example of why we shouldn't be so quick to judge Cody's son. Because if you were to judge Ruler based on how he looked in the first couple series he played, you'd be saying, oh, that guy's not an LCK caliber AD carry. And yet here we are, having watched them make that epic run. And I don't understand why we're so quick to write off a player that we all should have predicted was going to struggle right away. How many AD carries come from the challenger scene and immediately carry in the LCS? It's just not usually how it's done. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll have a transition like Laud, where he takes a couple weeks, figures it out, and then becomes a very solid player that doesn't have too high of highs or too low of lows. But most of the time, think about Stixxay when he first entered versus where he is now. Think about Altec when he first entered to where FlyQuest, God help us all, is hoping he will be. There's a lot of reason to believe that he and Ollie can improve with more experience. But, I mean, is there anything outside of IEM Gyeonggi? Some things that maybe showed up there that reminded you of flaws that we overlooked from when he was on Dream Team that we can point to more readily? Because I don't think that should be enough to make us nervous.
The problem is, though, is that the rest of the AD carries in North America are pretty exceptional. There's some pretty solid AD carries in North America. But if I want to go through, let's play a name game. Lod was an amazing talent that came out last split. There's Altec who's still sitting around. You have a guy like Keith who has proven at times that if he is in the right if they play him the right way, he can be, exceptional. This is a guy that they brought on to challenge Wild Turtle that, replaced Piglet at one point. You have Arrow that's coming over from overseas. You do have Piglet. There are some guys that are inconsistent in there. Apollo, Wild Turtle, where maybe he can match up to him, but he's already starting out at like 8. And while you don't necessarily need to have the best AD carry in the world, and we're seeing as everyone's complaining right now that there's no agency, if I want to steal a word from Ghostcrawler, for AD carries, it's still a position, and it was an extremely exploitable position for anyone who played them at IEM Gyeonggi. And on Dream Team, he wasn't exploited like that. He was not totally pressured like that and constantly ganked and playing, 3v2s and 4v2s and all this stuff. So as time goes on, hopefully he'll adapt to it. But the problem is, if you're giving so much up, they seeded a ton of lane control. It's really hard for them a support to go and roam around like I'm sure they're going to want Ale to do, especially with how good Dardoch is and what he has done with Matt roaming around with him in the past. It's really hard to just leave your AD carry when he doesn't have control over his lane, where he doesn't feel comfortable, where he doesn't feel safe. And that's really what I'm pulling from IEM Gyeonggi, is he didn't look comfortable at times. And for the majority of the time, he didn't look like he was confident in his play. And sure, they put him on things like Ezreal, and Ezreal is one of his better champions, and that gives him a lot of ability to play within himself and to get out of sticky situations. But again, he's ceding so much lane control that when you just give up a complete lane, that's a ton of pressure that you're giving up on the bottom side of the map. That's a ton of pressure you're giving up on Drakes, where if you get really unlucky and you give up 3 Infernals or 3 Mountains in the first 25 minutes of the game, you're sunk. That gives up so much pressure in the later parts of the game. So I'm not writing Immortals off in any regard. I'm not writing Cody Sun off in any regard. I still think he can be an exceptional player. But like I said earlier, our expectations for Immortals were through the roof. We heard Dardoch, we heard Flame, adding Pobelter, adding this young rookie guy. Like, everyone was going nuts. We thought this team was going to be fantastic. We thought this team was going to have Gorilla or Peekaboo on it. That's just incredible. And now we're stuck with Ale and an AD carry that didn't meet what our expectations were for a rookie. We didn't expect him to be double lift, but we did expect him, to maybe be better than Wild Turtle. And after, a tournament that I guess doesn't matter, I can't definitively say he's an upgrade over Wild Turtle. That's really where it comes down to me.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think it's too early to judge Cody Sun, but I think you make a really good point about how there's a wealth of strong bot lanes that he's going to have to go up against week in and week out, and he's going to be learning on the job. Because you're right, he was not attacked that way at Dream Team, and I think that is a thing that people, and I'll say myself in this, I forget about that because I look at the raw numbers. It's like, why wouldn't you attack Cody Sun? He's clearly the best player on this team. And the answer was, well, the other players on this team were weaker, and the way that challenger teams were playing at that time is, let's attack the weakest players and limit how much Cody Sun, or the strong player on whatever team we're going up against, can actually do. And the difference is that now Cody Sun is the weak link. Now he's the one that's going to have a whole bunch of junglers trying to gank his lane, if for no other reason than that they're going to try to keep Dardoch away from helping Flame and Pobelter.
Yeah.
And since so much is dependent on this core, this trio in the top, mid, and jungle, getting along and building up these synergies, every moment they have to spend babysitting Cody Sun and Ale, or making sure that they have the resources that they need, or getting them safely across if they want to ward or anything else, that's a concern for me. That's all time that's lost that could be doing other things, like getting Flame and Pobelter ahead, which is really what this team is built to do.
Yes.
And I think they can figure it out. I like Ollie as a player. I watched him on Hong Kong Esports. I think he's a good support. I think that Cody Sun can be a very good AD carry in this league. I'm not in any way done with him yet, but I think that rookies take time, and especially a guy like him, it looked like the spotlight didn't rest well on his head. I think that's the way I would describe his tournament performance. It did not feel like the extra attention was making him thrive so much as it was making him make misplays and challenging him in a way that he might not be ready for yet. And if he's not ready, that could really hurt them early on in the split. And this is not an Immortals team that we've seen do really well. Have to come back from these kinds of challenges.
Exactly.
What determines the season to you, Walter? What at the end of the day, all of this, we've given all these things. What is the big catalyst that determines this?
So the defining factor is going to be this sort of chip on the shoulder of Flame and Dardoch, I think. I do agree. I think Cody Sun will come into his own. I think the first week or two will probably be a little iffy for Immortals, and we'll have articles about like, oh, where did Immortals go wrong, and yada yada yada. And I'm sure week 2 we'll be doing guess the lines, and they'll be against someone like Envious, and Envious will be at like minus 200 or plus 200, and I'll go, I don't know, Chase. I'm not liking how Immortals is looking. Apollo is pretty consistent. Hakuo has shown that he can be aggressive in lane, and just they're willing to just die constantly. And Lyra looks pretty good, and they might be able to neutralize that top lane jungle combination. I'm going to say Envious, and then they're going to crush us in week 3. We're going to lose money on it, and then we're going to come back in week 4 and be like, so Immortals are actually a good team, and we all overreacted, right. And I'm sorry to everyone who lost Uniquins on gambling on Envious. We should have known they're a bad team. But at the end of the day,
I don't know which one of us you were impersonating there. That's the best part of it.
Some random voice. Again, I just do random voices. I don't impersonate anyone on purpose. I just random voice. I'm going to do something. But it's going to come down to the chips that are on Dardoch and Flame's shoulder and managing them. I think they can look within themselves and go, listen, last image of me is me sitting the pine behind Expression on Longzhu, or the last image of me is me yelling at my owner and, being this bratty kid that no one likes because I'm yelling at Piglet, and I got into a fight with Locodoco, and everyone loves Locodoco, and blah, blah, blah. The problem is that sometimes with those types of chips, you get arrogant, you get too cocky, you get too confident, and if they go on a kind of a tear at some point, Dardoch needs to remember, there are some times where people figure you out. There are some times where you play champions you aren't necessarily good at. There were moments where he was playing Gragas during the summer that Gragas, while it sort of fits what his playstyle is, isn't really a champion he's great at. He's not fantastic at it, and it cost them at points when they really tried to force the Gragas against like Rek'Sai matchups. Flame, he can overextend. He does have a history of getting too cocky when he's up a couple of kills. So it's really finding the nice, gooey, warm center inside those molten chocolate brownies. Like, sometimes you cook them a little too long, and they're hard as a rock. And you're like, well, I want to eat my brownies, but, like, I can't chew them. And other times they're like soup because you forgot you're, like, in Denver and you didn't use the high altitude directions or something like that. Like, you want to just find that nice, perfect gooey point where they sort of melt in your mouth, but they're sort of a little gummy and just, it's perfect chocolate. They need to find that point. If they can find that point, Dardoch and Flame, I believe, are good enough to carry some of the deficiencies that I think this bot lane are going to have throughout like early to mid-season. And then it's really fine-tuning. And once those guys in the bot lane hit where they're at, it's just getting into your stride, realizing you're probably not going to go 18-0. You're probably not the best team, but if you can make it to the playoffs and you know who you are and you know how to exert who you are into other teams, this is definitely a team that can make some noise.
Absolutely. And one more quick thing I want to point out before we make our final predictions. This is going to be their third different head coach in 3 splits. I'm pointing that out.
No, it's not.
Whether that's history teacher was technically a head coach for this team. Not for very long, but he is listed as a head coach in their historical database. Either way, they are moving on from Dylan Falco, who was a significant portion of how their strategy was built last split, even if you're not going to count the very brief history teacher period. They've moved on from Jez's, obviously, now is at Fnatic, so they've lost an assistant coach there. They're going to be figuring things out on the coaching side of things, too. Obviously, Loyoda has been a very good analyst for them. Hermes was a good strategic coach in previous stops, so it's not that I think the coaching staff is going to be bad in any way. I just think it's yet another part of this team that's going to have to adjust early and figure it out for that playoff run that you're talking about. It's just another piece to the puzzle that, again, I don't think enough people, bring up how essential Dylan Falco was to the system that was created there. It's important to recognize these things. But Walter, at the end of the day, where do you put this team?
So I had to change my prediction because I cannot ignore that IEM Gyeonggi happened. I cannot completely dismiss it as a worthless tournament. I have to take into account that those are the first time we saw this team in action. Mm-hmm. That being said, like other analysts, I've definitely cooled on this team. I still think towards the end of the split that they'll be back up where I sort of expected them. But right now, I'm going to say they make it into the playoffs, but I think it might be a little bit of a dogfight between them and Team Liquid. I think Liquid might have a better early season while the bot lanes are sort of finding themselves. And if they can hopefully avoid playing against Liquid in the first couple of weeks until Odi-sun and Ole really do get their legs under them, then that'll really, really help them later on. But I think they're probably going to get in on a 5 or a 6 seed. And then in the playoffs, that's really when we need to watch out for them.
Yeah, I have them as a 5 seed in the regular season, making it to the semis right now. That's my written up version. I still have to make a couple tweaks. We still have 3 more episodes to record after this that you should definitely stay tuned for the rest of this week. But I am higher on this team than most, and it mostly comes down to I have remembered every episode of this podcast that we've done post IEM. We do this every year. Week 3, we're like, oh man, it's like IEM really didn't matter again, every time. So I'm just going to skip the part where I pretend like IEM matters, and I pretend like him playing against 2 Korean bot laners that he's never going to play against, that had way more time to practice and way more synergy behind them, is maybe not the best way to judge Odi-sun and Ole. And I'm going to say that we should probably look at him as still a young talent that is unrefined, but high upside. Ollie is a guy that has a lot of experience and still has the ability to mesh well. We have to see for certain. And I love the core of this team. So I am higher on this team. I am much more confident they're going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of how long that learning period, getting used to the new system, new coach, new bot lane, basically everything is going to take. But that's why they play the games in the season, ladies and gentlemen.
Walter doesn't like this team because Ole played in the LMS. That's all it is. Walter hates LMS.
That's all I heard, for the record.
What?
When I talk about this later, it's going to be all about Walter hates Taiwan, and that's why he doesn't like Immortals. But, type away. Let us know what you guys think about Immortals. This is obviously a very divisive team. Walter and I come down differently on this team, so I'd be very curious to see where you guys step in on it. You can let us know. Comment sections here. Also on social media, the podcast is at Rough Drafts Pod. I am at RedShirtKing on Twitter. Walter, where can the nice people at home find you?
You guys can find me at Ceades_LOL.
Awesome. And of course, if you do enjoy this show, please consider contributing to our Patreon. It means a lot to us, and it'd be very cool of you. And until tomorrow, when we come back and we talk about a team that maybe is not soaring nearly as high as their name would like to suggest, though I wouldn't say their name suggests much greatness either.
It's a terrible name. It's awful.
Goodbye, Internet.
Hey there, Ceades here. Thanks for checking out the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/roughdraftspod. For just $1 a month, you can join your fellow listeners in our patron-only Discord channel and help keep the content coming, or join our VIP club where $1 a show or $8 a month gets you first priority on all patron content like our patron-only Q&As. And check us out on all of our social media, Twitter at @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, as well as on iTunes and YouTube by just searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.